Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hello, welcome to the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I am Dustin Pickering, your host and anchor. Today we have Robert McDowell. He is the author of 6 books of poetry, 14 books of fiction, criticism, and creative nonfiction, and editor and translator of dozens of collections. His poems have appeared in journals and papers around the world, including Poetry, the Hudson Review, Sewanee Review, the Harvard Review, and London Magazine, among others. With Mark Jarman, McDowell co-founded and edited the Reaper Magazine and Storyline Press. He served Storyline Press as editor and director for 22 years, selecting and guiding into print more than 250 volumes of poetry, fiction, criticism, memoir, writing guides, and verse plays. He created the Rural Readers Project and co-founded the annual International Poets Prize. He has taught at UC Santa Cruz, University of Southern Indiana, and the Low Residency MFA program at Bennington College. Thank you for joining us today, Robert. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's wonderful to hear. So my first question is, of course, we don't want to talk about your book a little bit, your upcoming or your newly released book, Sweet Wolf. Where did you come with this title? It's very interesting to me.
Oh, Sweet Wolf?
Yes.
Well, I'll read the epigraph for that. It has always been with me, and I was just waiting for the right opportunity to be able to use it, and this became the opportunity. And it's actually a quote from Emily Dickinson. Right. So what it says is there not a sweet wolf in each of us that demands its food? Which is rather Fang-like when we think of Emily Dickinson, but she was of both the tooth and the claw. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it just seemed like the perfect title to use. Because I'd also been working for 5 years on a novel that's just out, actually. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. So Emily Dickinson and Virginia Woolf actually come back to contemporary Ashland, Oregon, and meet in this book. And so she's always much on my mind.
Emily, or both of them, or Emily Dickinson?
Oh, both of them.
Oh, wow. Actually, that's interesting. So you called this idea from an Emily Dickinson poem, and it's interesting that it kind of stuck with you for a while, and you just were waiting for that opportunity to throw it out there and get it into the public, I guess. And that's very fascinating how you kind of a poet's mind works. It's really interesting to me. It's that's fascinating. So my next question is, and I noticed in a lot of the endorsements and so forth for your writing and your work that they talk about you being original and an original thinker as well as poet. So what do you think, in your opinion, what makes you an original poet, and have you taken the time to develop this originality of thought and style?
Well, it's easier to answer the second half of that question than the first half, because I don't know that I'm original particularly.
It's really opinion, I guess. I mean, anybody could be original to anybody else. So exactly. I guess
I mean, we're all original, every one of us, and if some people see that in the work, then I'm grateful. I mean, I'm quite aware of the long ladder I'm climbing behind all of the people who came before me.
Right.
And I've always been aware of that. So, I mean, I think that part of people recognizing your originality or your talent is the fact that they recognize who your precursors are. You're clear about that, I think. And I've been very fortunate. I mean, I don't know if I've selected well, or I have been fortunate. I mean, I've been fortunate to have as mentors both Emily Dickinson and Virginia Woolf. who are, you know, as alive to me as any live person I know.
Right.
And there are others. There are many other poets who have come before me that you know, you know, I mean, all the way back to Homer and the Odyssey was an early influence on me. So, you know, there are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of, you know, people at any given moment you could say, well, yeah, she really influenced me. He really influenced me. I learned something from that person.
Right.
And it's just been like that all the way through. So I think that, you know, what I would say to the second half of the question is originality in poetry comes from a great knowledge of what has come before you, not just the names, the work. You know, you have to get that. You have to get that work into your bones. And
I think there are a lot of writers, quote unquote, who are not so much readers out there, and I think that shows a lot of times in their actual writing. It you know, can be clumsy or not have much style to it.
Yes, that's a problem. I mean, as a teacher, I confronted that all the time. I mean, I once had a girl during office hours who said to me, I asked the, you know, pretty stock question. I said, we were looking at her poems, and I said, well, who do you read and who do you like? She was 19, and she said, oh, I don't read anybody. And I said, that's what I said. I said, that's interesting.
How do you answer that? I mean, how do you respond to something like that?
I said, like you did. And I said, well, why did you make that decision? And she said, oh, because I don't want anybody to imitate, you know, I don't want anybody to mess with my style. And then I did the bad thing, you know, I blurted out because I was only 20. So I take some, you know, I admitted this was bad. I almost guffawed. I sat back in my chair and I said, you don't have a style. You know, that's the whole point. This is why you read people. This is why you
exactly. Yeah.
You can develop a style, but you don't have a style yet. You have nothing. She
had a friend who had a similar experience. A friend of mine was doing a reading, and somebody came up to him and was talking to him, and he said, well, what do you read? What writers do you enjoy reading? And they're like, I don't want to cramp my style, you know, it's like I have my own original voice and all this. And he said he cringed. He was like,
well, you know, I mean, I think everybody is in that position at one time or another. I mean, I had a teacher who once, I mean, I was in a workshop and I was on the worksheet that week, and there were lots of poems. I mean, I read 5 poems. Everybody was, you know, showering me with praise. And then George Hitchcock, the teacher, waited until the very end. And he said, Robert, I could take one line out of each of these 5 poems and almost make a good poem. Yeah, of course, I reacted negatively to that, and I went back to my dorm room that night through the mist, grumbling and swearing at him. And, you know, what the hell does he know? He's old. He doesn't know anything. And, you know, I went back to my room, and I couldn't go to sleep. And, you know, in those days, it was probably a 2-pack cigarette night. And sitting at my desk looking at these poems, and sometime about 3 a.m. it hit me. He's right. And there's the line, and there's the line, and there's the line. That taught me a lot, you know. That I learned something about take your time, revise. Don't think just because you think you've got a finished poem, it's at all finished. You know, all those poems that I had on the worksheet, they were, you know, some of them were clever, and they were notes to poems. But there was one really good line in each one, and that was the cool thing, you know. So I went back, and I saw him the next day, and I said, "You're right." So, you know, that's important too, to you know, admit that that's the way it is, right?
Right.
Yeah. That who keeps hold on a minute. Of course, it's daughter. She's waiting to be accepted as the host into the chat room. I'm just passing that on.
Okay. Yeah, we usually we'll record it and put it on YouTube. We don't usually let a lot of people come in. It just complicates things.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
she
but that's okay. So it's interesting, the stories about learning experiences of, being a poet and or a writer in general. And you come across moments when it's like you're kind of stumbling on a rock, and it's like someone says, look, you're not all that, basically, you need to work on this. And it's good to have people approach you and be honest, and have constructive criticism. And I think that's an interesting experience, And in poetry, I mean, in writing, it is work. I mean, it is a heavy work and mind work, and that's why I was asking earlier about originality. It's like kind of work you put into being just an original thinker in general. It's like it's not something that just comes and falls on your head,
No, it's not. It's prying up a lot of rocks and
right,
looking under them for the words, and it's. I mean, I find it gets even, it's more intricate than I believed it ever before, the older I get. So,
absolutely.
It's not like it gets easier in the sense that, oh, well, yeah, I know how to do this. I mean, there are poets out there who do that, who just repeat, rinse, wash, repeat. And,
right.
I mean, one acid test for that is, do you ever go back and read a poem by that poet? I mean, you might like a poem, and then you go back and try to read it again, and it just doesn't.
There's nothing to it. Yeah.
Exactly.
When you get poets like Emily Dickinson, who you can read hundreds of times and just never quite grasp the depth of emotion and thought and there's very few poets like that.
Yeah, she just has so many layers. There's nobody like her. By far, I think by far the greatest American writer who ever lived. She just, sometimes I'm not even sure she was human.
Yeah.
I think she was kind of dropped here and kind of had this work to do. She was assigned this work and she got it out, and she got out her almost 2,000 poems, and then she died and went back to wherever she came from.
Right. She definitely had sort of a celestial consciousness to her.
Oh yeah. She was more of heaven than any writer I've ever experienced. And she's the one person who could go toe to toe with God and best him.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, which she did all the time. I mean, she just, I mean, God doesn't stand a chance against her. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
She's amazing that way. Anyway.
Right.
So yeah.
In speaking of this kind of like dark and light celestial type stuff, my next question, and sort of a general poetry question: how does a poet balance the positive and negative aspects of life in their poetry, and do you think it's necessary to balance the positive and negative, or can a poem be pure light or pure dark?
Yeah, all of that. Yes, a poem can be pure light, a poem can be all dark. We know from spiritual practice that achieving equanimity is a good thing to do in life, and certainly in poetry, there's room for that as well. Again, Dickinson does all of that. She's has a lot of poems that are beautifully centered and grounded, and the balance is amazing. You didn't even realize she was trying to balance something until she balanced it, but then she also has poems that are pretty dark and very dark, and poems that are ecstatic. She was an ecstatic poet like Rumi. So usually when she's writing and when she's talking, she's like, up there, her brain's on fire. And, and that's, I think that happens. You can. Anyway, it's just it's a very strange experience. So I think that I guess I would say, in my life, in my spiritual practice, I'm constantly involved with questions of achieving equanimity, balance. In poetry, not so much, because I want the poem to be free. I want the poem to go where it wants to go and take me along with it. And
right.
Sometimes that's up to a place of equanimity, and sometimes it's to kind of a place of madness.
Yeah, I think a poem should be free. It should, fall into its form and work itself into the fold.
I agree with you. Yeah.
It's sometimes I've actually had people say your poems are too dark, or there's not enough too serious, to whatever, and I just thought about that, and I'm like, yeah, I just don't follow the be cheerful all the time kind of thing.
I know. Yeah. Well, I mean that is I don't know, what is that? I guess that's the poetry of Rod McEwen, bless his soul. He was a nice man. But, he wrote sentimental, soft little poems.
Depends on the poet, I guess. Whatever your nature is. Whatever your nature is as a person, it shows through your poetry, I think,
right,
too.
Exactly. So there are a lot of, there are all kinds of poets out there, and everybody has their thing. They have their comfort zone. They go outside the comfort zone, or they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I don't know. I think we're just richer for the whole stew.
Mm-hmm.
I love the stew.
I like the idea of poetry being a kind of pioneering of the spirit, and somebody out there is like trailblazing, and some of us are, sitting back and watching and then following after the fact, or maybe going off on our own little, trail out there, and just depends on your approach to life. And I think that's, you say like it's this big stew, there's just so many different kinds of people that are writing poetry, and they should be free to express what is their nature.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. How poor we would be if we did not have all these diverse voices.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to see a poetry like that.
Right.
Fortunately, we don't have poetry like that. There's something for everybody, and it's an amazing mixture of just so varied. I mean, so many different ways to look at life, and so many life experiences that we don't have firsthand. The poetry gives us.
Mm-hmm.
I just find that so valuable and so wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
But some people feel different. I don't know. I just I like the diversity, and I like that we have all kinds of directions to go out into. So,
I mean, and like not just in poetry, but in life in general. If there was only a couple of types of people, it would be so boring. And you can meet all sorts of people from all walks of life, and there's just as many poets out there as there are people. In that sense, different types of people from different types of value systems in life, and that all factors into their writing and their experiences, going to their writing. I think that's a good observation of the diversity of life. Very positive and wonderful thing.
Well, I'm sure you get to experience that firsthand every time you do a show like this, because you have all kinds of different people coming on, and you get to choose. You're kind of inspired one week, like, oh, I want that, and then the next week, oh, it's something completely different, and
mm-hmm.
I think that's fabulous. That's a great idea. So
it's very fun. I really enjoy doing these shows. It's really enjoyable for me to learn about people and do different things. So I was going to ask you, would you like to read a poem or two for us?
Absolutely. Do you have any requests, or just anything?
Just anything you feel up to reading.
Okay. I'm sorry for my voice, by the way. I can feel it and hear it in my own ear that I'm kind of raspy. But
I can catch you. I understand what you're saying. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I just had a surgery on the 1st of June with full anesthetic, and
mm-hmm.
that kind of knocks you out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you come back, I notice when I come back, my voice is all messed up. And this is a short poem called Joe. You can't get any more generic than that. Joe was one of my best early friends.
Okay.
And he was brilliant. He was sort of like an original hippie before there were hippies. And he was a terrific filmmaker. He was a wonderful poet. And he didn't make it much past his 30th birthday, sadly enough. But this is Joe. We sat together on benches, awkward and unloved, watching heat ripple across the cracked blacktop. It was summer. School was out, as you soon would be, leaving the push mower half fed in the grass, smashing the front windows of the house, and running inside to the sweltering attic, where you hung yourself with your belt. I was miles away by then. You went back to no one, just the benches, and summer empty and heavy, nothing left but heat and the belt around your neck that held you and would not break. Yes, that's a little heavy, huh?
Yeah, it's a nice poem. I mean, it's lovely in the way especially the last lines and what they imply there. It's a very tragic event, obviously, and yes. I think you portray your relation to it very well in that poem. And I really can capture the sensation of being farther away from a person who is in need of emotional care and not kind of being impotent in so many ways of helping that person.
Yes, thank you. I like that. This poem is called,
a wonderful poem. Okay, go ahead.
This poem is called No Little Genius. So we were talking about this earlier, actually, being original and, are we geniuses or not? I joke with my friends sometimes when we're sitting around and, well, who's a genius?
Right. It gets thrown around kind of loosely these days,
who knows? No, he's not a genius. I mean, we thought he was a genius, but he's not a genius. Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, so this is called No Little Genius, and this is actually a more or less true story. If I'd been a smart boy, perhaps a little genius, I would have found a way to meet Vanessa Bell before she died the day before my 8th birthday. The boy you read about in Dickens could have pulled it off, but not a stupid American kid who had no clue that anything existed beyond the town that chained him, that called him mine, and sat him down in school each day to break his spirit, teaching him nothing he'd revere when he was old, like meeting Vanessa Bell, Virginia's sister, before she died. Of course, it was always too late to meet Virginia, who, as she wrote, felt the weight of every word in her fingers and crossed over 11 years before my birth. But Leonard, her husband, was still around when I was 15. What was I thinking? Not much. How hard would it have been to fly to England or hop a tramp steamer to Ireland? But the Jack London in me was dormant and would be for years. No genius then. Had I even heard of Leo Wolfe? I can't say, lacking the memory of a genius. That chance also sailed away. So did the opportunity to cure the cancer that killed my mother, the addiction that wrecked my father, and the depression that drove my sister to kill herself. Or the option of euthanizing the lousy men that killed so many women everywhere. Was it millions or billions? But I had no genius for any of it, not even a little, not a damn drop. Much older now, I feel the sparks of genius all along my shadow. They're not spectacular and don't do much more than make me work with perseverance and joy at that which I love most, sharing stories, understanding pain, and changing bad to good if I'm able.
Sounds like that's a kind of another poem about impotence in the face of life. You know, there's so much that you can't really do much about, but you begin it with, obviously, with the, you know, you have this possibility in front of you that you totally missed, you know, as a kid, you know, to kind of associate with some of the heroes of literature.
You're right.
Some of the iconic names, and you didn't even realize it. So you kind of poke fun at yourself a little bit, and then it develops into a more serious reflection on, you know, just not being able to do much as a human being living in the world. You know?
Exactly. Well, you know.
Excellent.
Thank you. I think that hits it really well. I should have probably said before I read the poem, it's a little unfair because I know these people so well, like I just assume everybody does, and that's not a good thing. But right. Vanessa Bell is actually the beloved sister of Virginia Woolf.
Mm-hmm.
And the famous British, I mean, you know this, but I mean, you know, somebody might not know this. And she's also a very famous British painter.
Okay.
To this day. So that's who she was. And then, of course, Leonard Woolf was Virginia's husband. Yeah. He married Virginia, and probably, I believe anyway, he kept her alive 30 years so that she could write those books. You know, I don't know that she would have survived without him. So he was a big, you know, but there he was, you know, I was 15 years old and he was still alive.
Wow. Strange world we live in.
I can't believe that. Had I met Vanessa Bell, I'm sure I would have curled up in a ball and started weeping and hoped that she would give me a teddy bear and a hug. Whereas with Leonard, I always thought, you know, I could have had a conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
We could have talked, you know, because I was finally old enough to, and he loved talking. He was brilliant. And wouldn't that have been something?
Yeah, absolutely. I could have no telling what you could learn from somebody like that.
Right.
I'm curious, how many years of your writing does your recent book contain, Sweet Wolf? How many years have gone into that?
It's a good question. And I mean, you know, I was like a miner going through stuff, old books, manuscripts.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Poems in magazines that had never gone into a book. And of course, with the new poems, those were just, you know, many hadn't been published at all. So, but I finally figured out towards the end of the process, I think it's like close to 40 years.
Okay. Wow. You know, a huge,
like,
long-standing career there.
Well, you know, yeah, it's kind of spooky, you know, Jesus, you know, what happened, you know, but it did happen. I didn't die yet. And and, you know, I mean, I think of all the dead who have gone before me, and many good friends and many fellow writers. And, you know, it's just the luck of the draw. I don't know what happens. But you know, I realized that, you know, I started writing seriously when I was about 11 years old. And not that I don't think there's any poem in this book that has, you know, comes from that stellar era of, say, 11 to 15, thank God.
It might be embarrassing.
It was pretty embarrassing, yeah. I found some of those poems and I just thought, it's like my friend Rita Dove, you know, who I remember talking to Rita once, and, you know, we were talking about the first poem. What do you remember the first poem you ever wrote? And she said, oh, yes, I do. And I said, really? You know, how old were you? And she said, I don't know. I think I was about 8 or something. And it was a poem to the Easter Bunny.
Oh, wow.
It said, I still remember it. And so she then recited me this poem about the Easter Bunny that was, you know, yeah, it was probably 15 lines or so. And it was, of course, it was an 8-year-old poem. But, you know, still, there was something so sweet watching America's Poet Laureate reciting a poem about the Easter Bunny.
That's an original experience there.
It was, you know, I thought, you know, gee, Rita, should I threaten you? What could I get out of this if I had it secretly recorded and filmed?
Yeah.
anyway, it was delightful, and
Right.
you know, we all have poems like that. I'm sure you do. You know, you probably
I'm
have
sure back there. I wrote a poem about football being like a bird when I was in seventh grade. You know, think really silly stuff. You know, child's imagination that is pretty expansive when you think about it.
I love that though. The football like a bird. Now that I like. See, I was thinking that, you know, and this is another thing writers do, right? As you were just describing that, I thought the first thought that came to my mind, honestly, was I'm going to steal that.
Take it. I don't. That was I was seventh grade.
Yeah.
I don't even remember it. I don't remember the exact poem, but you know, it was the football was a bird. You know, I don't know. I don't remember the exact poem exactly, but that was the image.
What kind of bird?
I have no idea. I guess an eagle.
Well, that's good. So you were an Eagles fan. Oh, that's good. I like that.
I like Eagles. Yeah, I like Eagles. I like Eagles quite a bit. They're interesting.
Yeah, it was better than me. You know, I had to grow up being a Rams fan.
In
the old LA days, which was, you know, they had this great defensive team, including my favorite player of all time, David Deacon Jones, the Minister of Defense. And they had a great team. You know, they would go through the regular season. They'd only lose a few games. They were, you know, they dominated a lot. They were tough. And they went into the playoffs, and every year they lost to the Minnesota Vikings. Except for the 1 or 2 years they got through the Vikings somehow, and they had to play the Packers. You know, and the Packers would kill them every time. So, you know, in those days, they never beat the Vikings and they never beat the Packers.
Right.
Ruining my childhood.
Yeah. Oh. So I think we have about a remaining 2 or 3 minutes left. And I think maybe we can cover a little bit about this. What can you tell us about Storyline Press in that time? I'm just curious about it because it sounds like a really fascinating endeavor. What was the original idea? Where did you come up with that?
Well, it was two-pronged, actually. My part of the idea was I wanted to have a press that was based on the model of Leonard Woolf and Virginia Woolf's Hogarth Press, one of the great presses of the 20th century. And so the structure of Storyline Press followed that model. And except that we didn't we weren't able to sign up T.S. Eliot,
no, of course,
or Sigmund Freud. that was a setback. But you know, anyway, it was an independent literary press that was intended to discover new writers, promote their careers, while at the same time also giving rebirth to mid-list writers who had fallen out of favor or, you know, couldn't find publishers anymore. And then the occasional big prize winner who would come to us with like their third book or their fourth book. You know, I mean, I think we published 7 Pulitzer Prize winners. All of them were books of criticism. Maxine Kumin, a wonderful poet who won the Pulitzer Prize. We published her novel, Quit Monks or Die. And it was a pet project of hers that she could never publish. And so we came along and she asked and we agreed, and man, that was great. You know, I mean, I loved working with her, but so it was like that. We ended up publishing a lot of books. We were, I guess you could say, in the right place at the right time for the new renaissance of American publishing, in which 9 independent presses were selected by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation in New York as the sort of beacons of this new publishing world, and we were one of them. So we were part of the Mellon 9, and you know, had a lot of support, and it was a great, for me, it was a great 22-year run to be able to balance my own writing and my own work with this other work of selecting and critiquing and publishing all this work from all of these great writers. So there are a lot of writers out there who you know, their first, second, third, fourth books are all with Storyline Press, and that's fun, you know. That's
absolutely. Yeah, I'm a publisher myself. I love the process of discovering somebody's work and then just being like, I really latch onto it and publishing it and pushing it and, you know, finding ways to get it into the market, quote unquote markets, you know. That's the hard part.
Well, it's heartbreaking too, though, isn't it? Because when you have, well, the late Liam Richter put this to me really well. He said, well, you know, every time you select an author, Robert, you make a friend for life, and you make 1,000 enemies.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think that's potential.
People what you didn't take. And the thing I always hated about it was such a difficult trade-off, because I mean, yes, I loved the book and I loved the author, but I could think of at least 10 other books I loved too that we couldn't do. You know, you can't just
take time and energies that you have, and so much,
and money. You know, I mean,
exactly.
So I always felt bad about that, but you know, on the other hand, every book that got out there was a book that got out there and wouldn't have necessarily without us. So I'm real happy about that.
Wonderful. I mean, it sounds like, you know, you've got quite a legacy behind you. I mean, you've been publisher, a poet, and lots of you know, interesting events in your life. And we look forward to, you know, our viewers checking out your books and looking into Storyline Press. And so we're going to wrap things up a little bit. But it was wonderful talking with you, Robert. I really found a lot of what you had to say interesting, and hopefully we'll get this to you soon. And to our viewers out there, we're looking for 1 million subscribers to our channel. So please tell others what we're doing and get the word out there. Tell others, and like our videos. Leave some comments if you like what we're saying and doing. And also tell, like, you know, get your friends involved. If you have somebody that's out there wants a platform for your for their new book, or for just to talk about literature on YouTube, then get in touch with us at Literary Corner at NewYorkParrot.com. And please, if anybody out there has some spare money, we definitely could use a little bit to continue boosting our efforts. And you can donate at paypal.me/nyparrot. That's paypal.me/nyparrot, and that is on. That link will be on our channel. And thank you again, Robert. Thank you to our viewers out there. I'm Dustin Pickering. This has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. We are the only and best show offering a global audience for writers, poets, and artists and creative minds all over the globe. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dustin.